Hey guys, Lord Naren White here, the Holy Ghost of the one true God, back with you with the next video in my series reading The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn by Mark Twain. Without further ado, returning to The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn as read by Lord Naren White. Then they all agreed that Jim had acted very well, and was deserving to have some notice took of it, and reward. So every one of them promised right out and hearty that they wouldn't cuss him no more. Then they come out and locked him up. I hoped they was going to say he could have one or two of the chains took off, because they was rotten heavy, or could have meat and greens with his bread and water, but they didn't think of it. I reckoned it warn't best for me to mix in, but I judged I'd get the doctor's yarn to Aunt Sally somehow or other as soon as I'd got through the breakers that was laying just ahead of me. Explanations, I mean, of how I forgot to mention about Sid being shot when I was telling how him and me put in that dreaded night paddling around hunting the runaway black. But I had plenty time. Aunt Sally, she stuck to the sick room all day and all night, and every time I see Uncle Silas mooning around, I dodged him. Next morning, I heard Tom was a good deal better, and they said Aunt Sally was gone to get a nap. So I slips to the sick room, and if I found him awake, I reckoned we could put up a yarn for the family that would wash. But he was sleeping, and sleeping very peaceful too, and pale, not fire-faced, the way when he come. So I sat down and laid for him to wake. In about half an hour, Aunt Sally comes gliding in, and there I was, up a stump again. She motioned me to be still and sat down by me and begun to whisper, and said we could all be joyful now because all the symptoms was first rate, and he'd been sleeping like that for ever so long, and looking better and peacefuller all the time, and 10 to 1 he'd wake up in his right mind. So we sat there watching, and by he stirs a bit, and opened his eyes very natural, and takes a look, and says, "Hello, why I'm at home. How's that? Where's the raft?" "It's all right," I says. "And Jim?" "The same," I says, but couldn't say it pretty brash. But he never noticed, but says, "Good, splendid. Now we're all right and safe. Did you tell Auntie?" I was going to say yes, but she chipped in and says, "About what, Sid?" "Why, about the way the whole thing was done." "What whole thing?" "Why, the whole thing. There ain't but one. How we set the runaway black free, me and Tom." "Good land. Set the run? What is the child talking about? Dear, dear, out of his head again." "No, I ain't out of my head. I know what I'm talking about. We did set him free, me and Tom. We laid out to do it, and we done it, and we done it elegant, too. He'd got a start, and she never checked him up, just sat and stared and let him clip along. And I see it warn't no use for me to put in. Why, Auntie, it cost us a power of work, weeks of it, hours and hours every night, whilst you was all asleep. And we had to steal candles and the sheet and the shirt and your dress and spoons and tin plates and case knives and the warming pan and the grindstone and the flour and no end of things. And you can't think what work it was to make the saws and pens and inscriptions and one thing or another. And you can't think half the fun it was. And we had to make up the pictures of coffins and things, anonymous letters from the robbers, and get up and down the lightning rod and dig the hole into the cabin, and made the rope ladder, and send it in cooked up in a pie, and send in spoons and things to work within your apron pocket. Mercy sakes! And load up the cabin with rats and snakes and so on, for company with Jim, and then you kept Tom here so long with the butter in his hat that you come near spilling the whole business, because the men come before we was out of the cabin. We had to rush, and they heard us and let drive at us. And I got my share, and we dodged out of the path and let them go by. And when the dogs come, they weren't interested in us, but went for the most noise. And we got our canoe and made for the raft and was all safe. And Jim was a free man, and we done it all by ourselves, and wasn't it bully, Auntie? Well, I never hear the likes of it in all my born days. So it was you little rapscallions, that's been making all this trouble, and turned everybody's wits clean inside and out, and scared us almost to death. I've as good a notion as I've ever had in my life to take it out of you this very minute. To think, here I've been, night after night, and you just get well once, you young scamp, and I lay I'll tan the old Harry out of both ye. But Tom, he was so proud and joyful. He just couldn't hold in, and his tongue just went in. She a chipping in, and spitting fire all along, and both of them going it at once, like a cat convention, and she says, well, you get all the enjoyment you can out of it now. For mind, I tell you, if I catch you meddling with him again. Meddling with who? Tom says, dropping his smile and looking surprised. With who? Why, the runaway black, of course. Who do you reckon? Tom looks at me very grave and says, Tom, didn't you just tell me he was all right? Hasn't he got away? Him, says Aunt Sally, the runaway black? 'Deed he hasn't. They got him back safe and sound. He's in that cabin again, on bread and water, and loaded down with chains till he's claimed or sold. Tom rose square up in bed with his eye hot, and his nostrils opening and shutting like gills, and sings out to me, They ain't no right to shut him up. Shove! And don't you lose a minute. Turn him loose. He ain't no slave. He's as free as any creature that walks this earth. What does the child mean? I mean every word I say, Aunt Sally. And if somebody don't go, I'll go. I knowed him all his life, and so has Tom there. Old Miss Watson died 2 months ago, and she was ashamed she ever was going to sell him down the river, and said so, and she set him free in her will. Then what on earth did you want to set him free for, seeing he was already free? Well, that is a question, I must say, and just like women. Why, I wanted the adventure of it, and I'd waded neck deep in blood to goodness alive, Aunt Polly. If she weren't standing right there, just inside the door, looking as sweet and contented as an angel half full of pie, I wish I may never. Aunt Sally jumped for her, and most hugged the head off of her, and cried over her, and I found a good enough place for me under the bed, for it was getting pretty sultry for us, seemed to me. And I peeped out, and in a little while Tom's Aunt Polly shook herself loose, and stood there looking across at Tom's over her spectacle, kind of grinding him into the earth, you know. And then she says, Yes, you better turn your head away. I would if I was you, Tom. Oh, dearie me, says Aunt Sally. Is he changed so? Why, that ain't Tom, it's Sid. Tom's, why, where is Tom? He was here a minute ago. You mean, where's Huck Finn? That's what you mean. I reckon I ain't raised such a scamp as my Tom all these years not to know him when I see him. That would be pretty howdy-do. Come from out from under that bed, Huck Finn. So I done it, but not feeling brash. Aunt Sally, she was one of the mixed upset-looking persons I ever see, except one, and that was Uncle Silas. When he come in and they told it all to him, it kind of made him drunk, as you may say, and he didn't know nothing at all the rest of the day, and preached a prayer-meeting sermon that night and gave him a rattling reputation, because the oldest man in the world couldn't have understood it. So Tom's Aunt Polly, she told all about who I was and what, and I had to up and tell how I was in such a tight place that when Mrs. Phelps took me for Tom Sawyer, she chipped in and says, Oh, go on and call me Aunt Sally. I'm used to it now, and 'tain't no need to change. That when Aunt Sally took me for Tom Sawyer, I had to stand it. There weren't no other way, and I knowed he wouldn't mind, because it would be nuts for him, being a mystery, and he'd make an adventure of it, and be perfectly satisfied. And so it turned out, and he led on to be Sid, and made things as soft as he could for me. And his Aunt Polly, she said Tom was right about old Miss Watson setting Jim free in her will, and so, sure enough, Tom Sawyer had gone and took all that trouble and bother to set a free black free. And I couldn't ever understand before until that minute and that talk, how he could help a body set a black free with his bringing up. Well, Aunt Polly said that when Aunt Sally wrote to her that Tom and Sid had come all right and safe, she says to herself, Look at that now. I might have expected it, letting him go off that way without anybody to watch him. So now I got to go and traps all the way down the river 1,100 mile and find out what that creature's up to this time, as long as I couldn't seem to get any answer out of you about it. We'll go ahead and stop there for this week. As usual, I want to say thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed. Please like, comment, and subscribe, as it greatly helps the channel. Light be with you all. Take care, and thanks again.